Chapter 20. Ma and Bob walked quietly through the forest. Their steps made a rhythm to the music of the forest noises. Bob's arms ached from carrying the goldfish bowl, but he said nothing. "I can carry the goldfish if you are tired," Ma said. Bob opened his mouth to protest when he heard, "Let her, old man. It's her way of saying she's not angry anymore." Bob closed his mouth and looked at the fishbowl and then at Ma. She stood waiting, clearly ignorant of the fish's words. He handed the bowl to Ma. "If it gets heavy, I can take it back." "We can take turns," Ma said, nodding. Ma was carrying the fishbowl when the night fell and they came back home to the village. The neighbors saw their return and all crowded around as if they were selling good luck. "Did you find Minley?" they asked. "Where is she? Where did you get a goldfish?" Both Ma and Bob shook their heads over and over again. "No," they said, "we didn't find her. We don't know where she is. The goldfish is from the goldfish peddler. We followed his footprints thinking they were Minley's." "And we decided," Bob said finally, "to come back and wait. After she finds Never-Ending Mountain, Minley will come home." "Wait for her?" one of the neighbors said. "How can you let your daughter search for Never-Ending Mountain? You are just as lost as her." "We tried to find her, but now we do not know where to look. So we will wait," Bob said, and then glanced at Ma, who, though her lips tightened at the neighbor's words, did not disagree. "We trust Minley. She will come home." And then Ma and Bob went into their house, leaving the sea of shaking heads behind them. Ma placed the goldfish bowl on the table and quietly began making dinner. A soft breeze seemed to blow in the moonlight, spilling it through the open window and lighting the bowl like a lantern. Bob looked at Ma cautiously, but her face looked weary, but the gentle wind that rippled the bowl's water seemed to smooth the creases of her face. And when the cloud-white rice was finished, Ma took her chopsticks and fed the fish from her bowl. Chapter 21. Millie and the buffalo boy pushed through the crowd as the sun burned the tops of their heads. Millie, used to the spare harvest of her village, couldn't help gaping at the tall mounds of food for sale at the market of green abundance. The street and open courtyard were filled with umbrella-covered stands and stalls, flaunting jade-colored cabbages, curled cucumbers, purple eggplants, and tangy oranges. Glossy, sugared hawthorn berries like rubies on a stick made Minley's mouth water. "I don't see the king anywhere," Minley said. "Well, maybe he's not here yet," the buffalo boy said. "I don't know if I'll find him here," Minley said. Now in the daylight, the buffalo boy's friend didn't seem as extraordinary. What would the king be doing at a street market anyway? "She said he'd be here, so he will," the buffalo boy said, his mouth making a stubborn line. "Hey, get away from that," a vendor yelled as the buffalo attempted to eat frosty green lettuce. The buffalo boy quickly pulled him away. "Get your buffalo out of here," the vendor shouted, as red-faced as the radishes he was selling. "I better take him away," the buffalo boy said, pulling the buffalo's head away from the arrays of tempting food. "He's hungry. I should take him to pasture." "I'll stay here," Minley said. "You don't need to look for the king with me." "Okay," the boy said. "If you need a place to stay tonight, you know where my hut is. If not, maybe I'll see you around. Good luck." "Thanks," Minley said. But as he carelessly waved goodbye, she realized she might not see him again. Before he disappeared from sight, she grabbed the last coin out of her bag and ran to him. "Wait," Minley said. "Here, take this." "No," the boy laughed. "I don't need that. You keep it." "But," Minley started, but he had already turned around. "Goodbye," she heard him call, and the buffalo snorted a farewell as well. Minley smiled wryly to herself. Now what? Minley thought as she wandered past stalls, weaving around merchants and customers. How am I supposed to find the king here? "Please, spare a piece of fruit for an old man," a voice creaked. Millie turned around and saw a wrinkled, poor man begging at a peach stand. He was dirty and bent, and his clothes looked as if they were made from rags used to wash floors. "Please," he begged the peach vendor, "I'm so thirsty. One small peach, your smallest." "Go away, old man," the fat vendor said. "No money, no peach." "Please," the beggar said again weakly. "Pity a tired old man." "Get away from here, you worthless beggar," the vendor spat out, "or I'll call the guards on you." The vendor's loud voice had attracted attention from passers-by, and a small crowd began to form in front of the peach stand. "It's disgraceful to treat an old man like that," someone murmured. "Just give him a peach." All of you are so generous with my property," the vendor glared at the crowd. "If you care so much, buy him a peach." As Minnie watched, the beggar's hands outstretched and shaking with hunger, she felt a sharp pang inside her. It reminded her of Ba, reaching out with his last chopstick full of rice for her fish. The copper coin she had offered to the buffalo boy was warm in her hand. She could almost feel her heart beating around its round edges. "Here," she said, handing the vendor the coin. Then she picked the largest peach on the stand and handed it to the old man. He bowed to her gratefully and eagerly ate the peach. Forgetting about the inner city and the palace for the moment, Minnie watched him. In fact, as if under a spell, the whole crowd stood and watched him swallow the fruit until he held a peach pit in his hand. "Thank you," the beggar said in a much stronger voice. And he bowed to the onlooking people. "The peach was so delicious, I wish for all of you to be able to taste it. If you would humor an old man and stay a little while, I'll share my good fortune." The old man took a stick out of his pocket and bent down. In the dirt next to the black bricks, he dug a small hole and planted his peach pit. He stuck his stick upright in the little mound and then asked for water. Minnie, now fascinated, took out her water jug and handed it to him. As he poured the water onto his stick, it trembled, and, was she imagining it? It seemed to grow. And it was growing. The stick grew higher and thicker until it was the width of Minnie's arm. When she could no longer see the top of it, pink flowers and branches began to blossom out of it. As the sweet scent of the flowers filled the air, Minnie realized the stick had become a peach tree. The crowd of people seemed to realize this too, as they all gaped at it open-mouthed. Even the stingy vendor left his fruit stand to stare at it in awe. Like pink snow, the petals fell from the tree and made a soft carpet on the dirt. Green leaves sprouted, and as they cascaded over the branches, pale moon-colored balls like pearls developed. Almost as if they were small balloons being blown with the air, they grew into round fruit, blushing pink and red as they developed. Soon the tree was heavy with them, and the air was full of enchanting smell of ripe peaches. Children gathered around and stared longingly at the luscious fruit while the adults gulped with their mouths watering. Finally, the old man reached up, plucked a peach from the tree, and handed it to one of the people in the crowd. "Please," he said, waving his hand, "help yourself." The crowd needed no other urging. Young children climbed the tree and passed down the fruit, while the taller adults simply stretched and grabbed. A boy with a tired horse climbed onto his back to reach an especially red peach that called to him. Before long, everyone's mouths were full of soft, sweet peach flesh and groans of delight. Even the peach vendor, his stand forgotten, stood under the tree with his eyes closed contentedly and peach juice dribbling out of his mouth. Minnie, however, didn't join in the feast of peaches. "If I hadn't been eating peaches all the way to the city," Minnie said herself, "I'd be the first one climbing the tree." But as she was slightly tired of peaches, Minnie saw what no one else did. She noticed that every time someone plucked a peach from the tree, a peach from the fruit stand disappeared. "The baker is using the vendor's peaches for his tree," Minnie laughed to herself as she glanced at him through the fruit-eating crowd. He was watching with an amused look, and suddenly Millie saw that the beggar really wasn't that old at all. He must be a magician. Maybe he can help me get into the inner city. Millie edged toward him. As she weaved her way to him, the last peach was picked from the tree, and the leaves and the branches began to disappear. The tree trunk seemed to shrivel into itself, and it grew thinner and shorter. The crowd had finished their peaches, and the ground was littered with peach pits. When Millie finally reached the beggar, the tiny twig of tree vanished underneath the pile of peach pits, and the beggar was turning to leave. "Wait," Millie said, and grabbed his arm. However, as Millie took hold of his sleeve, it pulled back, and a glint of gold shone. Hastily, the beggar pushed back his sleeve, but the quick glance was enough for Millie to see that he wore a gold bracelet in the shape of a dragon. They stared at each other as Millie's quick-thinking mind somersaulted. "Only the imperial family is allowed to use the image of a dragon," Dragon had said. "Everyone knows a golden dragon is always and only worn by kings," said the buffalo boy. The words flashed in her mind, and Millie could scarcely breathe. "You're wearing a dragon," Millie gasped. "Only the is allowed to wear a golden dragon. You must be. Where's that beggar?" A loud, angry shout cut through the chaos. Millie recognized the vendor's voice. "He stole my peaches. I'll get him." Quickly, the beggar shook off Millie from his arm and began to run. She stared in shock as she finished her sentence. "You must be," Millie whispered to the ragged, disappearing figure, "the king." Chapter 22. Millie shook herself from her shock. "The king," Millie said. "I can't lose him now." And in a panic, she began to run after the tattered figure. It was quite a chase, or it would have been if the beggar had realized he was being followed. He wove in and out, around people and bins of rice, each step taking them closer to the unused areas of the city. Behind a pile of discarded baskets, Millie thought she had lost him, but luckily the gray sleeve of his loose jacket waved at her, and she saw him round the walled corner of the inner city. As an abandoned wagon hid her from his view, she saw him push against a portion of the wall. With a slow groan, the wall moved. "It's a secret door to the inner city," Millie gasped, and she was able to reach it just before it closed completely. With both hands, she pressed hard against it, and the door pushed open. And like the lid of a jewelry box, the door opened into a landscape of radiant colors. The bamboo, pine, and plum leaves seemed to shine in the sun as if carved from emeralds, and the accents of the pink and red flowers were like nestled rubies. Steps away from her feet, Millie could see a patterned pathway of water-worn pebbles. The central jade green lake mirrored the arching tile roofs of the pavilions and the rough beauty of large weathered rock sculptures. A winding covered walkway lifted up from the cloudy water like a lotus flower. It could only be the palace garden. But Millie barely noticed this. Instead, she stood with large eyes staring at the figure in front of her. The beggar was wiping his face with a delicate white cloth, and Millie saw again that he was not an old man at all. In fact, he was younger than Ba. The gray of his hair was wiped away with the cloth as well, and his beard and head were as glossy black as Millie's. His gray rags had been cast off in a pile next to him, and he was clothed in a bright yellow silk, the color of the sun. Intricate dragons and multicolored clouds that matched the designs of the gold bracelet he wore were embroidered on his robes and glittered in the light. There was no doubt now that he was the king. Then the king turned around and saw her. At his glance, Millie shrank to the ground in a humble kowtow. "Your Majesty," Millie breathed. Her knees could feel the thumping of her heart in her chest. "Caught," Millie heard him say, and she peeked up to see the king looking at her with the same amused expression he had had as a beggar watching the people eat the peaches. He shook his head at her. With his eyes twinkling at her, he could have been
Hello,
the...
Sequoia
Oh,
Squirrel.
shh.
Teachers, this is a friendly reminder.